Our primary interest in terms of the contributions we think we can make around the area of people with challenge, mostly challenge from other people who don't understand that there really is no challenge, is about education. I began the first in Ontario system of arranging what is now common in having the children arrive at school in the morning by bus and go home in the afternoon by bus so that they could live with their families. Not all the children, because not all were within busing distance. And looking back, another thing I did was I became aware that there were a fair number of deaf children in mental institutions in the province. And I began to investigate why some children who were deaf were in mental institutions. And I began to visit the institutions and discuss with the administrators the records and reasons and so on, why these children at very, very, very young ages were consigned for life to a mental institution. Large parts of it were that they did not seem to understand others around them. They, of course, were deaf and would have trouble understanding spoken language. They acted in different ways. They responded in different ways. And of course, if you can't hear, sometimes you don't understand and you do something that's not the appropriate thing. At any rate, there were a fair number of them. And working with some enlightened authorities in a number of major institutions, I arranged for these children to be taken from the mental institution and given a trial in our school, the closed school for deaf children. There were 21 children who were involved in that experiment. 20 remained with us. Some of them actually rejoined their families. All of them seemed to be doing fairly well in school. Only one young lad who was particularly troubled. We could not find ways to safely include in that school. But looking back from where I am now, I have finally figured out that I think I was trying to move towards inclusion, and I think I still am. That it never ends. One of the problems we have in our society, and I can only speak about Canada where I have experience, so I've worked in a number of other places, is that Canada doesn't really understand. And when I say Canada, I mean Canadian teachers, Canadian educators, and Canadian educational administrators don't understand primarily the idea that we have, that it is the right of those individuals, whatever label of disability they might have, to be with us, to be with the other kids. That's where we all should be. And Canada is struggling towards that kind of concept. We are still firmly rooted in the special education model where it is appropriate to tell some children that they are so different they cannot be with the other children. In the most important societal agency in our nation, the education system. It is the only system which takes in all the children except those with disabilities. It is the only place where they believe they have a right to say no to some children. So I'm passionately involved in trying to work with those people who have not yet moved their thinking along progressively as many others are moving their thinking along towards the position where I don't have to go into major mental institutions anymore and bargain to get children to come out and have a more community-type experience. I don't have to arrange a bus system so that children can stay with their families during the evenings. We're moving, society is moving, and I think we're all experiencing it. However, in terms of moving towards inclusive education, we have a long way to go. And I think I can say that in most of our nations. We are moving education is remaining as a very strong, very resistant, very determined barrier to social justice and human right of children being educated with children. We've had the opportunity to go around to a number of places and get some experience of other nations and what's happening around inclusive education. Inclusion is a revolution. Inclusion in education is not an evolvement of special education. It is a different creature. It does not follow the basic fundamental principles of special education. It says education has to respond to social justice and human rights. And that means the children have the right, the human right, to be together. And it doesn't matter a damn whether they can work at the same level as every other kid. They have a right, if they so wish, to be there. So there's another book, which I'm holding in my hand, To Do or Not to Do. What's the next slide? That is the question. Inclusive education, to do or not to do. These are snapshots of 7 nations and where they stand in terms of inclusive education. The lens, the way we look at this book and the contents is through the lens of the social justice, human rights perspective. We look at the nations we're looking at, 7 nations, in terms of, do they agree? How closely do they agree? Do they disagree with education and disability as a human rights social justice issue? The nations are England, and there's some authors, friends from England who actually have the first chapter, and they put forth the human rights perspective for the intersection of disability and education. One of the nations is Germany. Another nation is Croatia, a nation coming out from under the shadow of a previous regime. Canada, another chapter on England and a particular school system. India, second largest nation in the world, over 1 billion people. 98% of the children with disabilities in India do not go to school at all. India has recently declared a national policy of inclusive education. It'll struggle, the resources are thin, but the government has decided it's time to signal that we want to move. Malta, a little wee island nation, less than 400,000 people, has nothing but inclusive education. The government there decided some time ago to move in that direction. And the final nation looked at in this book is Spain. So this is the mock-up of the book. The book is not in print yet. There's still a little bit of work to be done on it. But if people want to have a look, quick look at it and browse through it a little bit, you're very welcome to.